Communism is both an ideology and a political system rooted in the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who envisioned a stateless, classless society where the means of production are owned communally. The foundation of communist thought is dialectical materialism, a way of understanding history and change through the conflict between opposing forces, particularly between economic classes. Marx's core thesis was that history is the story of class struggle between slave and master, lord and serf, capitalist and worker. The Communist Manifesto, written in 1848 by Marx and Engels, famously begins with the line, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. Communism aims to abolish private property, not your toothbrush, but ownership of factories, land, and capital that allows one class to exploit another." Marx believed capitalism would inevitably collapse due to its internal contradictions, giving way to socialism, the transitional stage, and then full communism. Under socialism, the working class, the proletariat, would control the state, using it to suppress the bourgeoisie and reorganize society. Eventually, the state would wither away, leaving a classless society. One of the first real-world attempts to implement communism occurred after the Russian Revolution of 1917. Led by the Bolsheviks and their leader Vladimir Lenin, the revolution overthrew the provisional government and established a socialist state. The Bolsheviks renamed themselves the Communist Party and founded the Soviet Union in 1922. Lenin adapted Marxist theory to Russian conditions, creating what's known as Marxism-Leninism. This model emphasized a vanguard party, a small group of professional revolutionaries who would lead the masses to socialism. After Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin rose to power. Stalinism was characterized by central planning, rapid industrialization, collectivization of agriculture, and brutal political repression. Millions died from famine, purges, and forced labor camps, gulags. Despite these atrocities, the USSR rapidly transformed into an industrial power, especially during the five-year plans. By the 1940s, the Soviet Union had become a superpower. Communism spread globally after World War II, especially in Eastern Europe, where the USSR installed satellite regimes in countries like Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. Meanwhile, Mao Zedong led the Chinese Communist Party to victory in the Chinese Civil War in 1949. Maoism emphasized the revolutionary potential of the peasantry rather than the industrial proletariat. Mao's rule saw land reforms, collectivization, and campaigns like the Great Leap Forward, which led to one of the deadliest famines in human history. The Cultural Revolution followed, targeting counter-revolutionaries and intellectuals. Schools were closed, historical sites destroyed, and millions were persecuted. Communist movements also emerged in Vietnam, Cuba, North Korea, and elsewhere. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara led the Cuban Revolution in 1959, replacing the Batista regime with a Marxist-Leninist government that survives to this day. In Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh united the country under communism after decades of colonialism and war. North Korea developed its own variant, Juche, emphasizing national self-reliance and extreme central control under the Kim dynasty. Economically, communism replaces market forces with central planning. In theory, this eliminates inequality and waste, but in practice, it often led to shortages, inefficiencies, and black markets. The command economy in the USSR decided everything from how many shoes to produce to the price of bread. Despite massive state investment in heavy industry, consumer goods remained scarce. Queuing for basics became a way of life. The Cold War was fundamentally a struggle between capitalist and communist systems, embodied by the USA and the USSR. It involved espionage, propaganda, proxy wars, and nuclear brinkmanship. Communism was associated in the West with tyranny, atheism, and lack of freedom. The Red Scare in the US led to McCarthyism and blacklists. In the developing world, communism was seen by many as a path to independence, equality, and modernity, though results varied. There were major splits within the communist world itself. The Sino-Soviet split of the 1960s divided China and the USSR, each accusing the other of betraying true Marxism. Yugoslavia under Tito rejected Stalin's control and pursued a unique form of self-managed socialism. Albania under Enver Hoxha isolated itself from both blocs, claiming to be the last pure communist state. Some regimes labelled as communist were more nationalist or authoritarian than ideological. Others were shaped by specific conditions, like guerrilla movements in Latin America or anti-colonial struggles in Africa. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, under Pol Pot, implemented radical agrarian communism, resulting in the deaths of up to 2 million people in just 4 years. Marx predicted that communism would arise in advanced capitalist societies, but in reality, it took root mostly in agrarian or underdeveloped countries. This led to adaptations of theory and often justified authoritarian control as necessary to guide backward societies to socialism. In the USSR, the Communist Party became a bureaucratic elite, more concerned with preserving its own power than advancing toward classless utopia. Corruption, stagnation, and repression eroded legitimacy. In the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, but they unintentionally hastened the system's collapse. In 1991, the USSR dissolved, ending 70 years of communist rule. China, meanwhile, embraced market reforms under Deng Xiaoping. The Communist Party remained in power, but private enterprise and capitalism boomed. China today is a paradox, a nominally communist state with the world's second-largest capitalist economy. In theory, communism promotes equality, cooperation, and social ownership. In practice, communist regimes have often been authoritarian, with limited personal freedoms, censorship, and persecution of dissent. Yet some argue that many failings stemmed from external pressure, internal sabotage, or the difficulty of implementing such a radical transformation in hostile conditions. Communism left a deep mark on the 20th century. It reshaped geopolitics, inspired revolutions, and provoked fierce resistance. It produced great achievements, industrialization, literacy, space exploration, and immense tragedies, famines, purges, gulags, and mass killings. Today, communist parties still rule in China, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, and North Korea. Elsewhere, they exist legally or underground. In Western democracies, communism is often used pejoratively, yet interest in Marxist ideas persists, especially among critics of capitalism and inequality. Marx's critique of alienation, the idea that workers are estranged from the products of their labour, from each other, and from their own human potential, continues to resonate. His analysis of how capitalism generates crises through overproduction and falling profit rates remains influential in left-wing circles. Despite communism's decline as a state system, its legacy endures. It shaped the 20th century more than almost any other force. The hammer and sickle, the Red Star, the Internationale, these remain potent symbols. So do the words, "workers of the world, unite." Communism sparked fear, hope, revolution, oppression, and idealism. It promised a world without exploitation, but in many places replaced one elite with another. Still, to billions of people, it represented a dream of justice and dignity. From Lenin's NEP to Stalin's terror, from Mao's Red Guards to Brezhnev's stagnation, from Castro's speeches to the Berlin Wall, Communism's story is one of utopia chased and corrupted, of idealism weaponized, of history rewritten. It asked some of the biggest questions. What is freedom? What is justice? Who should own what? What is the good life? And even today, amid rising inequality, climate crisis, and capitalist fatigue, these questions haven't gone away.